Hi everyone, and welcome to today's training seminar on token economies. My name is Evan, and my colleagues and I are students of the Autism and Behavioral Sciences program at Algonquin College. Today, Stephanie, Roshni, and myself will be teaching you about the basics of token economies and their role within the principles of behavioral intervention. Before we begin, by now you should have completed the pre-test that was provided in your training package. This test will be administered again after our presentation. In addition to this pre- and post-test, within your training package, you should find an outline of today's presentation, and that comes along with a couple diagrams and notes that will aid you. And lastly, you will find a training tool that will be used at the end of our presentation in a demonstration of token economies, so just hold on to those. Our session will begin with a review of ABA and reinforcement procedures, followed by our main topic, token economies, and we will end with a demonstration of what a session using token economies will look like. You will have the chance to practice these techniques and ask any questions at the end of our presentation. By the end of the day, you should have the knowledge to describe and implement token economy procedures within the context of ABA and its principles. So let's get started. First up, let's review. What is ABA? Applied behavior analysis is the study of human behavior with the goal of helping to change behavior in a meaningful way. ABA uses careful analysis to determine what environmental factors are affecting a certain behavior, then modifies these environmental events to influence a change. Behavior modification is based on a set of principles derived from many years of research in ABA, beginning with B.F. Skinner, who described operant conditioning, or the idea that the consequence of behavior affects the future occurrence of that behavior. In your training outline, you will find just a review of some of the behavior modification characteristics that might be helpful for you to remember as we further discuss this topic. Altering the events that occur before and after a behavior will influence the likelihood of that behavior occurring again in the future. Once the controlling variables of a behavior have been identified, we can use precise behavioral procedures to alter them, but it's important that these procedures are implemented in a controlled and consistent manner to achieve the most effective results. One of these modification procedures is reinforcement. Recall that the process of reinforcement involves strengthening a behavior through the consistent presentation of a reinforcing consequence immediately following that behavior. Reinforcement makes a behavior more likely to occur in the future. It can be positive, whereby a stimulus is added, or it can be negative, where an aversive stimulus is taken away. A positive reinforcer can be anything from social praise to a favorite food item. It just has to be something that the learner wants and something that will entice them to perform the target behavior again and again. Pairing one of these naturally reinforcing stimulus, which is known as a primary reinforcer or an unconditioned reinforcer, with a neutral stimulus, can make that neutral unconditioned stimulus become a reinforcer. Almost anything can become a conditioned reinforcer when it is paired with an already existing reinforcer. For example, a neutral object like a plastic poker chip can become reinforcing if the person is later allowed to exchange it for a more desired backup reinforcer. This will be important to remember when we talk about token economies later in the presentation. The last piece we will cover regarding reinforcement is the schedule of reinforcement. The schedule determines how often and when reinforcement is provided over several trials. For example, a continuous reinforcement schedule means that every single occurrence of a response is reinforced. This schedule is typically used when a learner is acquiring a new skill. Once the person has learned the behavior and can perform it consistently, an intermittent reinforcement schedule is used to maintain the behavior and gradually decrease the reinforcement needed. In an intermittent reinforcement schedule, not every occurrence of the response is reinforced. These schedules can be delivered using ratios or intervals. In your notes, you can refer to a copy of this diagram, which describes the different schedules of reinforcement and examples of what they look like. Knowing these schedules will be helpful when learning about token economies. During fixed or variable ratio schedules of reinforcement, delivery of the reinforcement depends on the number of responses that occur. If the schedule is fixed ratio, a predetermined number of responses must occur each time before the reinforcer is delivered. In a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, the number of responses that is required is different each time, although it does vary around an average number. Interval schedules, on the other hand, depend on the amount of time that has passed regardless of the number of responses given in that time interval. A fixed interval schedule requires the same interval of time to pass before each reinforcer, while a variable interval schedule delivers the reinforcer after varying amounts of time. Each of these schedules has different benefits and can help the learner in various ways. Depending on the learner's needs and skills, it is important to choose their schedule of reinforcement that will use the least amount of reinforcement required to maintain that behavior. Reinforcement is one of the most important aspects of behavior modification. There are many ways of administering reinforcement and using it to change behavior. But the most important thing to remember is that each learner is different and each requires special attention to find the technique that works for them. So now that we've reviewed applied behavior analysis and the use of reinforcement, we're going to move on to our main topic, which is token economies. So that's all for me, and I'm going to pass it over to Rashmi. Thanks very much.